0.9% of humans are true visionaries. We have people sitting in a visionary role who are directors. It's a small company and you can get by with it, but they're not true visionaries. We call ourselves visionary because compared to everybody else, I had the vision to start the company. But the true visionary is out scanning the horizon, looking at trends and accelerating trends and competing forces and figuring out how to dance between the raindrops and achieve this indispensable market position. That's different from saying I have a lot of ideas. If your business went away, how long would it take for your customers to replace you? And if the hole you leave is the same hole that is left when you pull your finger out of a glass of water, you do not have an indispensable business. You have not positioned yourself as a strategic growth partner. You are simply a replaceable supplier.
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of The Freedom Experience. I'm your host, John Moncrief. And if you're on YouTube and you're wondering about the background here, we're traveling through the US and we're in Savannah, Georgia at the moment. I'm looking over the river in front of me. And it's the best spot I could find in the hotel just to record this intro. So this week's episode, I'm joined by Bill Mills. He's a structural engineer turned CEO of Executive Group, an award-winning author of Breakthrough, The Power of Conscious Conversation, and he's the creator of The Leadership Process and one of the big reasons I got Bill on the show. So Bill's logged over 4,000 hours leading CEO roundtables. And that means he's not just dealing with the stuff in theory. He knows what works in the real world. He's worked with these teams. And in this episode, we break down 3 practical ideas that you can take straight into your business. Number 1 is closing the execution gap. Now, most teams are hitting 80% of their priorities or the rocks. And I believe that this is a mistake and something that's kind of come around through EOS, which is fundamentally a brilliant system, but you're aiming for 80%. And really that creates a huge execution gap. It leads to things like lost margins, stalled momentum, and potentially a sign of some deeper issues. So in this episode, Bill shares a simple tool, the force field diagram, that can help you to uncover friction points that might be slowing you down, and then how focusing on 2 or 3 of the right forces can close the gap and take you toward that 100%. The second thing we talk about is to become indispensable. It's about value proposition, and you have to figure out how to become indispensable to clients. And I love the way that Bill puts us. He asks, who would cry at your funeral? Kind of like a Robin Sharma thing, like who would cry when you die? So if your business disappeared tomorrow and your customers could replace you without missing a beat, you're replaceable. And that's not great for your business. So he shares some stories of how companies that identified hidden problems and kind of rode the horse in the direction that it was already going turned a low margin product into a strategic growth engine, kind of driving margins of like 70%. So listen in for that. And then we talk about shared control and multiplying results. So most business owners think that they're delegating, but what they're actually doing is holding on with one hand. And Bill explains how real leadership is about sharing, not just delegating control. When you empower teams, basically when you empower teams at the point of action, you reduce turnover and you ignite engagement and build a business that doesn't rely on you to move forward. So grab a coffee, pick up your notepad, and let's jump into this one with Bill. It's really good. Bill, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you on. I'm really excited for today's conversation.
Thank you, John. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for having me on.
So we're going to get into things like execution gaps today. And the first time I heard you speaking, I'd been working with a client and they were celebrating success at getting to sort of 78.2% of their goals or their priorities or the rocks for that quarter. Yeah. And I heard you talking about this execution gap, and I thought, I've got to get Bill onto the show and talk to you about this. Yeah. So maybe just to start with, give us a little bit of background about yourself and how you found yourself where you are today, helping business owners figure this out.
Well, it's a long and sordid story, but I actually was trained as a structural engineer. I almost got my master's degree. I was working on my final project, but then I had 2 kids and a car payment, a house payment. I thought, you know what? I'm never going to be an engineer forever. I was already working as an engineer while I was working on that, and I like people. I like process. I like building things, and so the structural engineer made sense to me. But at the end of the day, I just like helping design and build healthy companies more than I enjoyed building buildings. So that's how I started. I owned my own painting contracting business for a while. We had about a 35% EBITDA. So it turns out it's not that hard to be successful in the construction industry because there's so many goofy things that happen. But if you just get back to people and keep your word, you can do pretty well. But even that didn't have the deep satisfaction of what I ultimately wanted. And so got involved with consulting and training, and back in 1989, so 36 years already, I've been doing that. For the last 25 years, I've been running business owner, CEO peer groups. Several hundred people have come through that process over the years. I was adding it up. I'm north of 1,300 peer group meetings that I've facilitated. And so that's well north of 4,000 hours I've spent sitting, listening to business owners, large and small, sometimes complain, mostly strategize about how do I get to the next level and what's it going to take. So a lot of what I'll share with you today is their stories, not mine. I wish I was smart enough to come up with this on my own, but I'm a pretty keen observer. And when you start seeing the same issues again and again and again, and with a process mind, you go, okay, there is a reason that this keeps happening, and we got to change the inputs if we want a different output. And that's just how my brain works. So,
you working with those roundtables, what was it, 1,300 roundtables?
Sat in on more than 1,300. Yeah.
What are some of the patterns that you're seeing?
Well, there's the human pattern, right? There's the I'm not willing to admit that I'm a control freak, and the reason people aren't empowered is because I refuse to empower them, or I keep grabbing the wheel the instant it's not the way I would do it. There's certainly that. A lot of the patterns have to do with smaller companies in particular. Marketing is a really challenging deal. Like, how do you get the word out that you have a better mousetrap? Well, and then strategy. First of all, do you have a better mousetrap? I mean, that is a brutal question. The question I ask people is, who would cry at your funeral? If your business went away, how long would it take for your customers to replace you? And if the hole you leave is the same hole that is left when you pull your finger out of a glass of water, you do not have an indispensable business. You have not positioned yourself as a strategic growth partner. You are simply a replaceable supplier. And there's 15 people lined up that could take your place at any point. And that is a tough business. That is a tough model. And so that's the first thing. Operational excellence, you got to be able to execute. Having a great idea that you can't execute on doesn't help. And ultimately, the culture, the leadership, the people. We know the story. Culture eats strategy for breakfast or lunch, or probably 3 meals a day, probably. But at the end of the day, we say things like culture, but who's actually dived into the body of research that describes exactly how you create culture? And most entrepreneurs did not get in business because they wanted to have a bunch of people to manage. That was not their primary objective. And I've met many CEOs that go, that's the part of the business I don't like at all, dealing with people.
Yeah, I've heard it's the same thing I see as well. And a recent report that we put together was one of the biggest challenges, or one of the biggest issues that CEOs were talking about, is like managing the people.
Yeah.
Not what I did why I went into in the first place.
Well, people are complex. And so I told my wife that she was complex, and she took it like it was a compliment. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what our deal is, but we haven't taken the time to figure out the human challenges. And I just put a little note on LinkedIn today about why are we not fanatical about getting the right person in the right seat? And you wouldn't want your son or daughter to go marry a B player or a C player. But apparently in business, we rate people A, B, and C, and then we live with it. That just makes no sense to me. We just have to get serious about what we're trying to create.
Why are so many business owners in this place? Is it just that thing of not wanting to make that hard decision and do the hard things? Or is it we've got the 10%, they play very well, so we can hire downwards?
Well, it's a complex question, and there's probably as many reasons. I think you're on it. You said hard. It's a hard. I had a mentor who said we don't think properly about the challenges that we have. He said, think of it this way: there are problems that are simple or complicated. And then there are problems that are easy or hard. And we conflate the two, thinking that simple is easy and complicated is hard. He says nothing of the sort. Simple is obvious. Complicated is not so obvious, and we have to break it down into simpler and simpler pieces, and eventually you put a man on the moon, right? So it's a complex issue that can be made simple if you just stay in your prefrontal cortex without the emotion and break it down. When we say easy or hard, that means that's the emotional energy we have to expend to solve the problem. I have to have a difficult conversation with somebody, and I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know if they're going to get angry. I don't know. I can't predict. When I can't predict what's going to happen, I have stress. When I don't feel like I'm making progress with a person, and I've asked you 15 times to please follow the standard operating procedures and you won't do it, then I feel stress. I feel out of control. All of those are emotionally draining activities because our amygdala is kicked in. We are not in our prefrontal cortex. We're in fight or flight mode when we're in conflict. And that's what we call hard.
Yeah.
But if you make those two different decisions, if you say regarding this human being, what's the decision that's in the best interest of the organization, that comes up fast. People get that quickly. It's like, okay, so decision one is this is the wrong person for the organization. Decision two is when and how and where will I have the conversation that liberates them or me. And sometimes they're coachable and can change their behavior. And if that's
but so often it's give them another quarter, I'll have a conversation and give them another chance for a longer period of time. And we kind of kicking the can down the road. And
we do.
I think when I speak to entrepreneurs, the successful business owners, the folks who've broken through that ceiling will say, when I got the people right, that's when it happened. That's when I unlocked the growth, the value, whatever it is. But it just about every conversation I have with business owners, when I got that right, it all came together.
Yeah, I think that becomes the, in a way, it's the regret that I didn't do it sooner. And I think most every business owner, manager has had the experience of hanging on too long and hoping, hope is a great strategy, but they're hoping that this person will come around. When they finally let them go, there's a line of people at their door saying, thank you. And it's like, well, that's interesting. Why didn't somebody say something? How come this became a management issue when really the peers weren't having a good time? How come they weren't engaging in a way? And that's a different level of culture. When problems are being handled at the point of contact, rather than using the manager as the mommy person or the daddy person, and you reinforce a power over relationship, which much of business is. Here's an organizational structure, and you report to me, and you're my subordinate, and I'm your superior. All of that.
And we got this whole hierarchy.
It works completely different from partnering. Yeah. And collaborating, and so it's just sort of an old mindset that gets in the way. And ultimately, I think, and you can read this in Maslow's book, Maslow on Management, Abraham Maslow, The Hierarchy of Needs,
Yeah.
and he says the fundamental problem is managers like to feel in control. And now you have to share control if you're going to get anything done, because one person can't do everything. Well, I don't like to share control because then I feel out of control and then I feel nervous. And so you have this fundamental psychological existential threat that if I give up control, somehow I have to feel nervous. And it's like, well, no, you need to share control. You need to share power. And you don't hear that message much. We hear,
No.
I delegate it. Well, no, I have to, let's share this thing. And then there is a handoff. The baton does have to get handed off, but it's handed off in a way that we are, a healthy baton handoff feels like you're sharing, right? It feels like we're working together. So,
but you're just going back to what we were saying a little bit earlier. I think before we hit the record button. I mean, this is a fundamental kind of shift in mindset, is letting go the control. But there's obviously the balance with finding the right people. And the reason that you're probably thinking, I might as well get this done or do this myself, or that kind of thinking, is because you've been letting go to the wrong people. So it's the mindset needs to change from being in control in the center of everything to letting go of control. But you've got to make sure that you found the right people before you start doing that, I guess.
It's people and process. I think because there are people that are certainly, maybe we would call them a B player, but they have the potential to do more if we gave them a good process to follow. I mean, that's what the quality people have figured out. If we put in a Six Sigma process and people follow the process, you get Six Sigma results. And so they don't really talk about A players or B players if you're just doing that task. And so I think it is the right people, definitely. It's also the right process. So here, I mean, if you want to have a little irritable bowel syndrome, just read Gallup. They're saying only 18% of managers know how to build a team naturally. I mean, well, actually, that's not exactly right. 18% of managers are right people, right seat. Only 1 out of 10 naturally knows how to build a team. Another 2 or 3 with the right process, with the right training, can get there. 70% of people never should be a manager, will never be successful, just won't be able to do it. Their brain just doesn't work that way, where I pour myself into your success and your development. They just can't get there. So that means, 82%, 4 out of 5 managers are leading sub-optimized teams. And they go on to say that those teams are operating at roughly 51% of their potential. So 80% times 51%. You got a 40% execution gap almost built into your organization.
And I mean, that's huge. I mean, we were talking about EOS a little bit earlier as well, where just in terms of like striving toward the 80%. So, when you say 80% is good enough, and most organizations, at sort of 60 odd anyway, and you've got this 40% gap.
Yeah. So EOS, I believe in EOS. I've surrendered to EOS, and to the degree that you are utilizing the process properly, you're getting better and better results. Just the fact that it focuses people. When before we put the camera on, we were talking about how it's a rare organization that wouldn't benefit from focus. So,
was it you, Bill, that I heard talking about 5% of business owners have a plan or something along those lines?
I don't know what it is currently. When I was doing more and more strategic planning as part of my my consulting efforts, I was curious about that. And so Harvard has some really interesting articles on it. But back then, I don't know what's new, but it's probably the same. They said only 5% of executive teams spend enough time on strategy. And so if you think about, there's the day-to-day, and then there's the strategy. Well, where's most of their effort? It's like this. Most of their effort is on day-to-day, very little on strategy. And And you could say, if I got a killer strategy, then I could, I don't have to change my strategy every year. If I position my business properly in the marketplace, Southwest Airlines hasn't changed their strategy in 40 years. And they print money because they understood that they needed a business model that embodied the strategy. And then anything that wasn't part of that strategy, they cut it out. So they focus on one thing, point to point. I can fly to Hawaii with Southwest. It'll take me 5 days because I have to just keep hitting all these points. So they're not a spoken hub, and they don't try to be, and they attract people that fit that model, and they understand that's the sweet spot for them. And I think that's the challenge when you hit that ceiling of complexity. A business owner has to say, well, my current strategy is working to this degree. The market is rewarding me with my current EBITDA, my current sales, all of that types of stuff. And I would say if you don't have a minimum of a 10% bottom line, the market, you're just somebody's going to take you out because the market hasn't rewarded you with enough margin. They haven't said, we've got so much value from you, we're going to reward you with margin. When you start having a 20%, 30% bottom line, you are becoming an indispensable partner in somebody's life, and they don't want you to go away. So
in becoming that indispensable partner, your margin, your bottom line is actually going to improve if you focused on on becoming that indispensable partner. And I think there were a few things that you said there that are really interesting. One is that we're not spending enough time on strategy, but we're focusing on execution, but we're only playing at kind of 60%.
Yeah.
So not much time on strategy, playing at 60 odd percent. We haven't differentiated ourselves. And as you said earlier, if you stuck your finger in a glass and pulled your finger out, and you're going back to, are you making a difference in that customer's life, and that the water just replaces the finger.
Yeah.
We've got to figure this execution gap out, right?
Well, it's the but it's the value transfer, right? You have to be creating so much value for somebody that they reward you with margin and profit. And I tell people, when I die, I hope it's a catastrophe.
Tell us more.
People should be crying in the streets,
Yes.
Because and if I'm not creating much value, it's like, oh,
I love that. Yeah.
I'll just go join another peer group. So part of it is, are we creating value? One of my mentors was Larry Wilson. Wilson Learning in the 1970s was about a $50 million training company, which in the 70s was unheard of. And then he built Pecos River Learning, and he was just the consultative selling that came out of Larry Wilson. The S curve of business that came out of Larry Wilson. Yeah. I mean, you don't know his name, but he passed away 10 years ago, but he was a mentor and a friend of mine. And he said lots of fun things over breakfast and lunch when we would get together. One of them is you should ride the horse in the direction it's going. So basically your customers are telling you what they're rewarding you for. And that when you first get in business, probably that was the most exciting time of your life because you were always responding to customer needs in real time. Then you got a little successful, and then you got a little distracted. Next thing you know, now I got a quality engineer and I got this person, and they're focused inward, and you start to lose the customer. And the analogy he said was, early on, the customer would take a step and go, what's this? And they'd look down, and there you are hanging on to their left leg, so that every time they took a step, you move forward with them.
Love it, yeah.
And so he always has said, first of all, ride the horse in the direction it's going. And also, it's difficult to chase two rabbits. And entrepreneurs, I think many of them have entrepreneurial ADD, the bright, shiny object.
Shiny object syndrome, yeah.
And they and they're so busy creating the next fun thing, but we haven't optimized the initial offering yet, and the business structure that will support it in an optimal way. And so, it's a rare company that wouldn't benefit from focus comes back.
And maybe that's also the time for the transition of leadership. There are I was interviewing somebody last week, and she was talking about her brother had the grit and the kind of alpha male sort of, this is going to happen no matter what, I'm going to build a business, but hit that 3 million, 4 million plateau. Engineer, wanted to work on the exciting stuff, but couldn't take it to the next level. And as she takes over, there's this hockey stick kind of, she was a people person. And we go from stuck at 4 million to somewhere around kind of north of 19 million in a very short space of time because of that switch of the leadership. And
so I've got all these little sayings. I don't mean them to sound trite. It's just that I keep condensing nuggets down to a point where you can remember them. And I just say leaders take action to create a better future. And by that standard, everybody in your organization could and should be a leader because they can always take action to create a better future. How do you know when you have a lack of leadership? When they tell you, well, we're only going to hit 80% of our goal. And you say, what? It's like, here's the projection. We're going to lose 80%. It's like, that's what we're going to do? Yep, we're going to fall short. Well, that's not leadership. That's just somebody predicting. A leader goes, I'm looking at a shortfall. Here's 5 things I think we can do to eliminate that shortfall. There's always an action a leader can take. They are never without a response to the reality that's facing them. And so, when she took over, she deployed different actions, and it created a different outcome. It's a cause and effect deal. And so if we keep doing what we've always doing, here's another Larry Wilson one. If you keep thinking what you've always thought, you'll keep doing what you've always done, and you'll keep getting what you've always got. And that's that blind spot is I've got to open up my mind to a new possibility that this model, I've taken it as far as this model will go. And I've got to be willing to break the model in order to, I got to install a new engine. I got to do something to take this thing to its next potential.
But there's almost got to be an event that triggers that mindset change that I've actually got to do something. I can't carry on doing it this way. It's a change of leadership, or it's somebody walking in and saying, I've had enough, one of your A players, and saying, I've had enough, Bill, if it carries on this way, I'm out of here.
It's funny. The mindset you're talking about existed when they created the company. When they were willing to explore every opportunity and jump on a new idea. And then they got stultified somehow in their thinking, because now we've got organizational structure and process and people don't like the change. And so, but yet during COVID, everybody became creative again. The wolf was at the door and we had to find a way through it. And suddenly everybody opened up their creativity, and it's like you got to get shocked sometimes. That you boil a frog slowly, and if your business just slowly hits the wall, you don't realize, this is a ceiling of complexity. And the problem-solving approach I'm using is not breaking through that complexity. Maybe some of your viewers would love to know, there's an industrial psychologist. His name is Elliot Jaques, Jaques. He's passed away in 2014 or something like that. Spent 40 years as an industrial psychologist. The only reason you would know him at all is he invented the term midlife crisis. But otherwise, he spent all of his time trying to figure out what is he calls it the requisite design, the requisite organizational structure. And here's how it works emotionally, and here's how it works physically and structurally. Emotionally, if I work for you, Jean, and you're my boss, I have no problem knowing that you get paid 30% more than me, as long as you are solving more complex problems than I know how to solve. If you are figuring out supply chain issues that I have no idea, how does Jean know how to do that? I am happy to work for you. And I'm also happy to learn from you with the hope that one day I could maybe move up. And that just feels completely appropriate psychologically. It's kind of like the old, the mentoring system of a journeyman, learning from the master.
Yes.
That happens all the way up the organization. But structurally, it also has to happen too, is your job has to have more complex problems for you to solve than the job that reports up. So if I am, I'll just say a operator on the line and you're managing 5 lines, your job is more complex than mine and your problem solving capacity is more sophisticated than mine. And then everybody's happy. But as you move up that level of complexity, now it goes from managing, then it comes to a director level who is designing the lines and designing the engineering fit. And then you move up to what the EOS people call the integrator. So now I have multiple parallel processes that have to be solved. And I have to be managing marketing and sales and operations and customer service and HR and IT and all of those horses have to finish the race at the same time. My hunch is the reason companies stall out is those horses are no longer crossing the finish line at the same time. You've got too much capacity, you've got too many people, you've got too little resources. There's some gap in the equity of how all of that's happening. And that doesn't mean you have to run out and hire an integrator necessarily, but that could be. And I think EOS leans heavily on that. But then as you go one step higher to the visionary, the entrepreneur, now everything they look out at is outside the organization, and it is market forces and accelerating trends and competitive forces and supplier challenges and custom. And all of those things, according to his research, 0.9% of humans are true visionaries. We have people sitting in a visionary role who are directors. It's a small company, and you can get by with it. But they're not true visionaries. We call ourselves visionary because compared to everybody else, I had the vision to start the company. But the true visionary is out scanning the horizon, looking at trends and accelerating trends and competing forces and figuring out how to dance between the raindrops and get this, achieve this indispensable market position. That's different from saying I have a lot of ideas. I'm a recovering engineer. I have tons of ideas. That doesn't make me a visionary.
I mean, it's either they've got a lot of ideas or they're really good at the internal stuff and are just inwardly focused all the time. They're more of an integrator, I suppose, or they're very good at a specific area of the business, which has held them, has kind of helped them to take it to where the business is right now. But they're not looking at how things are, how the world's changing around them. And you see it so often.
You interpreted that exactly right. So that's what Elliot says is, how do you know that you have a person placed too high in the organization? They keep working low. As long as they keep working down into the organization, it's because they're comfortable solving that order of magnitude problems and they're uncomfortable in their role. And so you're coming up on your quarterly review with EOS and somebody says, did you complete your rocks? And you go, well, you wouldn't believe what happened. Who could have predicted that this would have happened? Johnny got sick. IT was busy, and so no, I didn't hit my goal. I only hit 80% of my target. You know who could have gotten it? The right person who was thinking, okay, and if Johnny gets sick, what will I do? And if IT has a problem, they have contingency plans and they have a more expansive problem-solving capacity, so they aren't caught short on their rocks. They succeed because they take into account all the things that can happen, and then they plan and they work into the future appropriately to solve that. And that's the work of Elliot Jaques, and the gentleman who's taken over his work is Tom Foster. You can look him up on YouTube.
We'll do that and then get them into the notes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
he's fantastic. I've had him speak several times at our peer groups. He's fantastic.
So I'm curious about how you approach this mindset shift that so many business owners need to go through. And I know your core focus, Bill, is your peer groups.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of business owners join a peer group for a while and they come off and they didn't quite get what they were looking for out of it. But I think mindset and that shift is a huge. If you're not going to change a mindset, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah. Your instincts are right. So when I'm looking for, when I'm vetting a member, I'm trying to figure out if they have a healthy ego. Healthy meaning I've got some confidence, but I'm also willing to open up the kimono here and show you all the stupid stuff I did last week and say, what do you think about that? I'm not looking for somebody who keeps everything close to the vest and will never share anything that could potentially make them look bad. Those do not make good peer group members. I'm looking for people that have this lifelong learner mindset of I love business. And I love the business of business, and it's not just mine. I want to learn about yours too, because somewhere in there, I'm going to learn something from a service industry that I can apply in my manufacturing B2B that will make a distinction, and vice versa.
Again, that visionary, scanning what's going on around them and thinking, I can pull this in. Yeah.
Well, actually, so that triggered another thought. There's I think it was Fast Company or Inc. magazine. I believe it was Inc. magazine. God, this has got to be 30 years ago. But I collect this stuff when I find it. So I think it was Inc. magazine, and they did something called the CEO Project. And they went out and interviewed over 700 CEOs. And as part of the questions, they just asked them how they were performing in building enterprise value. So how much is your company worth? You've been in business 10 years. How much is your company worth? And so there's a bell curve, right? The bell curve CEOs would be like the average business owner, average CEOs that is doing pretty good and they're making money and they might even be a millionaire. And their company is worth $2 million if they were to sell it. But the bell curve CEO, the companies that started at the same time in the same industry, their company is worth $20 million to sell it, 10 times more. So the top 5% were increasing enterprise value 10 times faster. And they wrote an article called The 10X CEO about it. And in that article, they found out there was just a couple questions they could ask. And if based on how the CEO answered, they could almost predict if they were going to be a 10X CEO or not. And the question was, can you give me 2 ideas that I got from outside of your organization and you implemented them in the last year? That's the first question. The second question is, and before you implemented it, you took the time to determine how it would impact the enterprise value. That's the one that...
So it wasn't just, here's a great idea, let's stick it in. You actually think about how it's going to turn into how it's going to change the value of your business.
Right. And I was working with a small company, and Dad had retired and just inserted his daughter in as the president. And she said that was awkward because the management team, one of the guys used to babysit her when she was a baby, so, and she was smart enough to realize I'm not a visionary. My dad made me the president. I have to depend on this team. And she put all her effort into making sure that they had a really, really healthy team. But Dad would come in and say, hey, I want to buy this building in town because I want to refurbish downtown in this tiny little Minnesota town. And I want to kind of support the local community. So I want to buy this building. I'll own it. And then I want you to put your display center in there and display all our products in there. And maybe off the back end, we'll add a little gymnasium. I mean, all this kind of stuff. And oh, by the way, I want the company to pay for it. And I'm saying, and what do you think that will do to the long-term value of the company? And it's like, well, he's my dad, so we're going to do it. So they do it. And I'm not saying it ended up being a bad idea, but nobody bothered to ask that question because nobody even knew how to calculate, well, is this actually going to increase the enterprise value? And why do we think it's going to be a good idea? And a lot of entrepreneurs, they're good ideas, but they just have so many of them. You got to focus.
We started off talking about the execution gap. And I think just to go back to that for a moment, for the listeners who don't understand what that execution gap is, maybe just give us a sense of what the execution gap is.
Yeah, you can feel it almost better than you can measure it, right? Because you're just getting your results. But here's what you feel. Oh man, we missed our targets again. Why is everything taking so long to get done? Why does it take forever to get anything done around here? That's an execution gap. People are agreeing to change and then nothing's changing. Continually new priorities. That's what, that's the thing that changes. Now we have a new priority and a new priority and a new priority. It's like the movie show Groundhog Day, where every day just feels like the last day. It's like we're not progressing. That's how you know that you have an execution gap. That's how you know you have a blind spot. And the solution is to say, let's identify the contributing forces, the forces that are allowing us to be as good as we are. We're an $8 million company and we've got a 10% bottom line, and so that's not horrible. But what's preventing us from being a $16 million company with a 20% bottom line? And what are the forces in play, the opposing forces? So then we could double down on the positives, or we could start removing constraints. But when you identify a specific issue and then look at the competing forces, this is called a force field diagram. It's been around for 100 years. You do a force field diagram and you get everybody thinking, and you can say, look, we identified 25 forces. Well, that's ridiculous. What are the 2 or 3 forces that if we double down on them for 6 weeks or 3 months and we take it as far as we can go? So you do an 80-20 analysis and pick the vital few, and then you focus your time and energy on those. That's how you start to break through these execution gaps. And sometimes it's people relationships, and sometimes it's process, and sometimes it's an inaccurate understanding of what the customer values. It's like, oh, you mean they don't want today what they wanted yesterday? Who would have thought? So,
yeah, that's a really good one as well. You see so many business owners who almost, well, the customer doesn't really know what they need or what they want. It's our job to tell them. And what's actually happened is, I think back to sort of cloud computing, and so many business owners who were stuck in, no, we're always going to be on the servers, and the big banks won't move and the government won't move, and we're now in the AI world. And I'm just hearing that same kind of echo again and thinking, I've been through this a few times in my life, and you aren't listening to that sort of direction of travel, where the horse is going, as I think you put it earlier.
It's very much that. If you do a really good job and become an indispensable strategic partner with your customer, it's almost like you get a seat at their executive leadership table, right? Because they are letting you know what are the accelerating trends or decelerating trends that are concerning them, and what they're going to do about it. And you're in working with them. I've got he's not currently a client, but for 10, 12 years, he was a client of mine. And they were operating on a 22% gross margin, which leaves you nothing. When you get to the market, you have to be so operational. They were making basically dies and you would stamp out like a rubber, like the way you would make a sole of a shoe, only they would other patterns. And he said every every purchasing agent we call on knows that if we try to raise our prices so we get a little bit more money, they already know there's somebody that's 2% share. They know all of them. And so we're always in these bidding wars. And I said, well, could be who you're going after.
Coming back to that niche.
Who values you?
Whose values?
Your gasket at a higher value. And he said, well, I do have this one company where we make like 75% gross margin on it because it's in the medical device industry. And we came up with this really unique seal. And we did this one project for the U.S. government where we put a rubber gasket and seal around a Humvee's front window. So it's bulletproof if you hit it, but you flip 2 levers and you can kick it out. If the frame gets racked by an IED, you could escape. They're willing to pay us, a 60% gross margin on that. I mean, it's still a gasket, for God's sake. It's not like, add that to the price of a Humvee, nobody even noticed. So, and then he goes, you know what? We solve vibration problems with gaskets. Nobody knows you can do that. We solve electromagnetic interference problems with engines. And so, and he solved it, not me. He comes back and he said, we've got this deal with John Deere. Which customers want to be able to use their phone and not have electromagnetic interference when they're driving around in their tractor? Well, farmers. So little by little, he starts penetrating these markets where the kind of the unknown problem that they can solve. Customers don't know they have this problem. You go to Toro and say, hey, you know what? We could fix your lawnmower so the guy could talk on the cell phone while he's riding your lawn. You can do that? So I was in his office one day and he said, you're going to love this, Bill. I'm just finishing up my proposal. He presses send. He goes, we got a 72% gross margin built into this one. Well, you know what? That's life-changing. So what am I saying? You got to open yourself up to, if I was to become indispensable. Oh, and what started this conversation was now John Deere invites him and about 30 other vendors to be in on their annual strategic planning. They're the preferred vendor list and they're only like a $30, $40 million company sitting there with John Deere. And he said, what am I doing here? And the manager said, we like the way you think.
You're a real partner. You're
bringing new ideas and solutions. That's what we value more than the gasket. We value how creatively you're solving problems our customers have. So that was the point of that whole conversation. It isn't obvious on day one what that would be, but you start the search. There's got to be something that differentiates, that creates more value than. And sometimes it comes out of you pay attention to how your customers are using your product, and they're using it in a way that you never even planned for. Well, there's something there, And so when you're indispensable, you're in on those strategic level conversations. You find out where they're moving before anybody else finds out. So you're already a partner, and then now you have an enhanced value proposition that you can take to other customers who you are potential customers, and you can use that enhanced value proposition to unseat the incumbent competitor.
Yeah.
And so this thing starts to become a flywheel.
But this is I think the challenge, in that we chase the revenue. Let's sort of chase 5, 10, 15 million or whatever. We're not looking at as closely as building the value in the business. And I think you were making a point a little bit earlier about sort of thinking a few years down and building that differentiator out. It might not be there right now. It might be something that you got to build, and it may take a bit of time, but that's really building the value, and the margin's going to come with building the value, as opposed to sort of chasing the revenue number all the time.
Yeah, and so part of the reason the margin comes with it is you build a machine that does one thing very, very well. And and then you pursue that one thing. And a lot of times the way we identify our customer base and we segment it is we go, okay, I'm a $5 million manufacturer, and I'm going to go after companies that are 100 to 300 million in revenue because I think I can handle their volume. It's like, well, that's not the right demographic. It is, I'm a $5 million manufacturer and I can solve this really unique problem. Now, who has that unique problem? I don't care if they're 50 million or 500 million or a billion. If I can solve that unique problem, that now my market mind opens up to a different level. So using size and geography and all that kind of stuff, those classic segmentation models, that's completely wrong. It is, somebody out there has a problem. I know how to solve that problem. That's my market, and I'm going to go solve that problem. I'm on the board of a company that we just hit 200 million in revenue this year, and probably 7 years ago we were 20 million. And it all came from the CEO who just kept grinding away at, there's got to be, we can be better at something than anybody else. And it turns out what we're incredibly good at is helping kids with disabilities learn how to speak. And so pulled together a model and suppliers that allow kids with disabilities to learn how to speak faster. Usually these are kids with autism, 2 years old, 3 years old, and they're speaking on their device, and then they learn how to speak because the device kind of prompts them. And pretty soon, their whole lives change. And while the industry takes 6 months to a year to provide a communication device, we can do it in 3 days.
Yo, that's impressive. I mean, what is the pull of this, the sort of North Star of this business, that we're changing people's lives or children's lives?
Yeah.
That's kind of tied into, we just want to solve this problem as quickly as we can for these children. Or
well, that was the driving. The CEO says we want to democratize communication, and if you're 3 years old and it takes a year to get your device, you missed a window that you might never get back.
Yeah,
and so she's a genius, frankly. I really have to give her all the credit, but she created a machine that runs so smoothly, and then they're continually trying to speed it up, and to grow in a frictionless way. You introduce friction. If you're trying to grow and you're trying to serve 15 different customers with 15 different things, how do you grow in a frictionless way? But if I've designed my whole model around solving this one problem, is how fast can we get you a device that works?
And then pull the friction out of the way of the people who are working on it as well. So they're focused, pull all the sort of corporate bullshit that goes on in between. Just get that out of their way and let them focus on building what's important.
Yeah, I don't have to serve three or four different customers today. I serve one customer. I have one problem to solve. I fly from Houston to Dallas. That's all I do, and you just keep refining it. And there's an element of faith associated with that, right? There
is. that I've actually found, I know there's this problem, I can solve that problem. And there is that element of faith.
Yeah.
But you've got to kind of resist the temptation, I guess, to go off and well, we could do a little bit of this while you've almost focus.
Well, so part of it is how you go to market. If you have a sales force that drags in roadkill because they get a commission off of anything they drag in. We could make this, right? Like, yeah, we could, but we'll lose money on it or we won't make our margin. But, it'll fill up the machine. And we make all these decisions based on it might be expedient in the moment, but how turnaround guys turn around companies is they go through and they fire about 20% of your customers right off the bat.
Take a look at what you're selling with the margins like zero or very minimal, or actually costing you money. And
if you do an 80-20 analysis of your customers, just print out all your customers, figure out how many of them constitute 90% of your sales, how many constitute 80% of your sales. And then you look at everything else and you go, wow, if I didn't have to deal with any of those customers, I'd still have 80, 90% of my sales. Wow, we could be a lot smaller, a lot more precise. I hate to say it, but some of the people that are creating friction could go away. We only keep
we go full circle back to having those A players, the right people on board, processes. Yeah.
And actually the bottom tier, the bottom bunch of folks that you serve, you're probably losing money on them, and it's hidden in the overall revenue streams.
So, but we've talked about it a lot today, and there's a lot going on at the moment for business owners to deal with. So economically, politically, there's a lot of change going on with technology and AI.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you are advising business owners or talking to business owners about at the moment, and how they should be thinking?
Yeah, well, the tariff thing is going to figure itself out eventually. I don't know when. I mean, we've survived everything that's ever been thrown at us. So I'm thinking we're going to survive this too.
And there's always kind of opportunities in it as well, somebody.
Well,
if you think back to the ups and the troughs and that we go through, there's businesses that come out of the other side much stronger.
I have a client who says, when the deck is being reshuffled, I just want to make sure I'm the dealer. It's like, where can I take control of this changing environment? So, that's the opportunity inside of chaos. And you just have to trust that, look, we'll figure it out. Let's just stay steady in the boat. We'll do the obvious things that we know how to do and give ourselves some time and maybe pre-buy a little product, whatever we have to do. But eventually, this is going to weed out some opportunities, and we have to be agile. The thing I'm talking to a lot of folks about is this thing I call the leadership process. You and I mentioned it offline, but most companies, the way they try to develop leadership and develop the potential of their people is they'll send leaders off to a class, and then the leader goes to a class with other leaders from other companies, and they come back, and then they're supposed to kind of this trickle-down economic theory of leadership, somehow that's going to change behavior at the front lines. All of Gallup would say, no, it doesn't, because still 8 out of 10 managers just don't know how to build high-performing teams. It actually gets worse. The University of Toronto did this study into human productivity, and what they found was for 65% of managers, so 2 out of 3 managers, the net productivity that they add to their team ranges from 0 to negative. So like, how can that be? It's like, well, think about it. How many managers? Well, I think I'll have a meeting, and so take people off the production line. Let's have a meeting and let's get everybody all jacked up about something. And, they throw sand in the gears because they don't know how to build a high performing team. So who does? The military knows how to build a high performing team. Professional sports teams, they know how to do it. And I tell people, why would you take a quarterback and have them go learn a play and not send the team along to learn and practice the play along with the quarterback? It's ridiculous, but that's how we approach leadership development. So I built a process, was inspired by a Navy SEAL that I hired to come and work with some of my key leader groups that I was working with. And basically we took kind of the Navy SEAL idea of it's all about team, these 6-man teams, team. And then we just teach an organization from the bottom up, starting with the team, the manager and the team. I won't get into the details, but let's learn how to build these mini continuous improvement events, mini Kaizen events into every single team. So finance is doing it, operations, all the teams are looking for some way to improve this month. And we just ask them, look at your job. What would make your job easier, more productive, or more fun? Let's just remove friction, because a person's performance is their potential minus the interference that they're experiencing. If we can just remove all the friction, All the things that disengage employees, well, suddenly you have an engaged employee. And Gallup would say engagement levels are the lowest they've been. Worldwide, they're like 21% engagement now.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
So this leadership process just removes disengagement, just removes friction. What's left is my natural desire to make my job easier, more productive, or more fun. I mean, the results are stunning. The first company we did it with, we ended in 2022. Now it's 3 years later. Their bottom line is up over 300%.
That was Heather, who's on Ryan's podcast. So if the audience is interested in listening to that, we'll put that into the notes as well. But that was phenomenal. I think the staff turnover was at 20% or something in 2022, and by 2024 was down to 5%, which means you're taking that, and then 300% overall increase was.
Oh yeah, it's crazy what has happened, and it's just because we started at the point where people had to lead. Like, decisions have to be made right here, and this kind of goes back to that execution gap. The reason you're not progressing is people are not taking action to progress you. And if your managers don't know how, then maybe the team does. There's the genius of teams, and all of us are smarter than any one of us. And so you focus them on removing friction and interference every month. I'll take all the low-hanging fruit. First, they solve their own problems, and they start solving cross-functional problems. And pretty soon you're looking at across the organization, which is where most of the execution gap occurs. Sales finds out something, operations doesn't hear about it to the last minute. Operations has a problem, sales doesn't hear about it. All of that stuff, all of that eventually going down a rant. Sorry, but anyway.
But it's almost is this tendency as you grow to become more complex, right? Instead, what we should be doing is trying to simplify it.
Yeah, they're tackling bigger and bigger challenges, and you're very quickly finding out who is taking action and who is not. And so it makes it pretty clear who you want to build your future around.
Yeah. Brilliant. So we'll make sure we put all that in the notes as well. I got one last question for you.
Yeah.
This podcast is all about entrepreneurial freedom. And I'm really interested in your perspective on what freedom means to you, and maybe perhaps in the context of the business owners that you work with.
Well, freedom, in a way, every entrepreneur has freedom in that they can make their own choices. So they have the freedom to make their own choices, but I don't think that's what you're asking. I think you're asking about that emotional sense of satisfaction. And maybe it comes from achievement. And maybe it comes from, I think it comes from not feeling trapped by your business.
Yeah.
I think freedom is, this is my business and I own it. It doesn't own me. I think that's what you're pointing at when you say freedom.
Yeah, I think we set off on this journey as entrepreneurs. We see an opportunity. We want to do it on our own terms. We want to work with the people we want to work with. And we kind of want that freedom to do it our way, I guess. But I suppose
therein lies the rub, because the freedom to do it our way is we want to feel in control. And that's exactly what Maslow says ultimately will be our downfall. We have to share control. We have to collaborate. We can't do it all ourselves.
So you're really unlocking the freedom when you start to collaborate and not trying to take it on yourself.
Well, and think about that. Then what are you doing? You're letting all these other people have the freedom to make choices and make decisions. And so you're igniting that human entrepreneurial spirit almost in every member of your team. I mean, theoretically, obviously, there's going to be some fall off, but that's the dream, right?
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on, Bill. I really, really appreciate it. I appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure. Great talking with you, and go forth and free up people, right?
Free up people. I'll hit.
Right. That's it for this week's episode. A very big thank you to Bill Mills for the depth, the candor, and the practical tools that he shared on this episode. I think if there's one thing to take away, it's this. The path to entrepreneurial freedom isn't about doing more. It's about doing what matters, figuring out what those rocks are, what those priorities are, and then finding the right people to execute on those and make sure that you get out of their way so they can get done what they need to do. Now, if you found this valuable, then please share it with fellow business owners, leave a review or hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss the next episode. And obviously that helps us to get this in front of more business owners like you, in front of more entrepreneurs, which is what we need to be doing. Now, next week we're doing a roundup of the Small Giants Summit, and I'll be sharing some of the key takeaways from that summit on the podcast.